This is a test. started if you all are ready. So welcome to everybody that's here today. It's very nice to see you. Glad we can all be here and be together. We've already done the roll call. Is that good enough? We have to do that loud. Can you do that for me?
Yes, sir. Judd Neufeld,
Here.
Wayne McLean,
Here.
Ken Johnson,
Here.
Dana Jones, Melissa Miller, Hugh Rawls, John Browning. It's not present for the record. Mayor Hill, the commission liaison.
Thank you, ma'am. So the next thing on the agenda is to approve the minutes from August 4th, 2021. And sorry, I was not here for that meeting, but thank you, Mr. McLean, for covering for me very much. So could I have a motion to approve them, please?
Motion to approve as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, well, is there any other comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carried. Thank you. I want to say a quick word, if I may, please. The first is thank you to each of you for your perseverance during these COVID days. When we see so many people getting affected by it, it's a very serious thing. And then I also wanted to bring to our attention that August the 18th was National Aviation Day in the United States. And it was a day that we celebrated the development of aviation. It was established in 1939 by President Roosevelt, who issued a proclamation on the anniversary of Orville Wright's birthday. And I had two quotes that I thought were inspiring to us when we think about our airport. The first one is from Wilbur Wright. He said, "The desire to fly is an idea handed down to us by our ancestors, who in their grueling travels across the trackless lands in prehistoric times looked enviously on the birds soaring freely through space at full speed, above all obstacles on the infinite highway of the air." And I thought that well described our privilege of aviation. And then the next one is from Charles Lindbergh. "Sometimes flying feels too good, godlike, to be attained by man. Sometimes the world from above seems too beautiful, too wonderful, too distant for human eyes to see." So those two quotes have some nice thoughts for us as we think about all the blessings we have at the Palatka Airport. And thank you all each for what you do to make it better and for being here for this meeting. The next on our agenda is public comments. And I know we have Mr. Dan Valancourt with us, who asked to be here and wanted to say a word to us board members as well as the rest of the audience. So if you'd like to come up to the mic, Dan, and make yourself comfortable. I guess, do you know all of us?
I can't say that I do. I've met you.
Yes. Can we just go around the room maybe?
Wayne McLean, pleasure to meet you. Ken Johnson, pleasure to meet you.
Dana Jones.
And then Hugh is our other board member.
Okay. Well, it's a pleasure to meet everybody. Just so you know a little bit about me and my family. My wife and I live in very southern Green Cove. We actually are in Clay County, but this is the closest city to us. So all of our shopping goes on here. I mean, we're here all the time. We're not going to drive up north. So Palatka, no, we don't live here. But this is basically where we do all of our necessary life stuff is Palatka. Palatka Airport is a fantastic facility. It really is. I mean, Embry-Riddle's in there all the time. I don't know if y'all noticed that, but that's because it's such a fantastic facility with such great instrument approaches. And it's just it's quiet. There's not a whole lot of traffic. So it's really a fantastic facility for training and for all kinds of other stuff. You got 2 runways, you got a long runway, and it lends itself to be useful on so many levels. And my company, we're growing a lot. We do employ a bunch of people that live in Putnam County, especially, and Palatka itself. As we grow, our customers are putting demands on us to travel further and further and further out of our central footprint here in this 5-county area. And one of the things that we're seeing is a big need to be able to get to places quickly. And so with that, driving to Savannah, community to Savannah there and back, community to Daytona there and back, and even past Orlando even, is going to be a difficult challenge. And what we're doing is we're dipping our toes into the general aviation charter world. We have a NetJet subscription that we've been utilizing a lot. We bought 25 hours of NetJets, and I got 9 hours left. I'm like, how did that happen? I bought it two months ago. I was like, how the heck am I using it that fast? But that's because the need is so great. Another thing we do, and this is my personal role, is I manage all the equipment, and we have a ton of it. It's too much. I don't know. I'm tired of buying equipment, but in order to keep it going, first of all, you can't get stuff right now. It's very difficult. So we have to go to the secondary market, which is auctions and third-party dealers, used equipment. So I travel all over the place. Just the other day, I think it was at your last meeting, actually, I was in New Mexico. We took a jet out of Palaca Airport, got in, got out. It's just a great, you can't beat that. You just literally walk in, you're in the airport, you walk out, you're on the plane, you go. And that's right down by my house. So, I mean, it's a fantastic, I'm so blessed that we're able to do it, and blessed that we're so close to an airport like this to have that kind of potential. And I'm an owner of an aircraft. It's not a jet yet. And jet travel is extremely expensive. And some of these trips are shorter, too far to drive, but really unnecessary to take that expensive big aircraft. So I have an airplane that I do own personally, but its primary function is for me to get around.
Welcome, Mr. Browning.
Its primary function is for me to get around, so I don't have to drive all these places. And having it close by here on a paved runway would be invaluable to me. And it will really help meet our needs as a business as we continue to grow. And it is just the first step. I can see us in the future getting into a more higher performance airplane than even mine, jets. I'm in the process of getting my commercial rating. And that's the goal, is to have the ability to travel for business when we need to. If you guys have any questions, I mean, I'm going to build a nice facility. I'm not going to build something bad. It's not massive, but it's big enough for what we need right now. And if you look at our track record, we do a pretty good job of making something nice.
And thank you very much for taking time to come see us and to love our community and for employing our people. It's very much appreciated. We need jobs, good jobs, and you provide those, and we appreciate that very much. And we appreciate your love for our airport. Our mayor and our commission and this board have worked hard and I shouldn't leave out Passero. It worked real hard to make this all what it is, millions and millions of dollars. And it's just a beautiful haven.
It really is. It's amazing. I can't even believe it's so close. It's so perfect. It's like, this is just, I don't know what to say. I mean, the potential is limitless for that place. I mean,
thank you.
Limitless.
Well, we'll be discussing your case later, but does anybody have a question before we get there?
Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank y'all. Thank you so much. Have a great
It's
day.
nice meeting you, sir, and thank you for coming. All right, next, is there any other public comments? All right, let's move on. Mr. Brown, and we're happy you're here, sir. Thank you. That's all. It is. Mhm.
There's traffic in East Palatka. I tell you.
Thank you. So we'll move on to number 4A. And this is a discussion on private hangar land lease proposals continued. And Matt, are you going to speak to us on that a little bit?
Yes. So the last month, as you all know, at the board meeting, there was a discussion on this topic, Mr. Valencourt's proposal on the private hangar. And where that ended was that basically additional information was needed for the board to make any kind of recommendation. And Sonny, if you could pull up that presentation slides. So Andrew had put together an outline. I should say before that. So there was a request also made to Passero, I think, to address some of this additional information to help give the board a little more information to make a decision on. So Andrew outlined some topics, and this presentation I have here is based on that outline. So if you can scroll on to the next slide. So the outline is what you see here on the agenda. First off, historical development and funding of hangars. So this is all related to hangar development on the airport. So historical development and funding of hangar projects at the airport. Number two, the airport master plan. That was specifically something that was mentioned at the last board meeting. What does the airport master plan show as it relates to hangar development? Number three, possible private hangar development areas. We'll touch on that in a sketch we had put together related to this topic. Private hangar feasibility, that was another specific question. What is the feasibility of building such a hangar? We need a little more information to kind of understand what that is. And then finally, what are the next proposed actions? Go to the next slide, please. Okay, so historical development and funding. So first off, the funding historically at Palatka Municipal Airport has been funded by the state, by FDOT, either at 80% or 100%. And historic, what I'm gonna talk about is since 2004, that's since Pastoral has been a partner with the city and with the airport. So since 2004, what we can say about the hangars that have been built. In 2008, one of the East T hangar buildings was built. Actually, I should say two of them, buildings E4 and E7. So that was two 5-unit T hangar buildings, one of which had a bulk hangar. So that was 10 T hangars and one bulk hangar unit. And then in 2015, also on the east side, building E3 was built. That's an 8-unit T hangar. And then also there was some additions to buildings E4 and E7, which included 2 additional T hangars and then 1 more bulk hangar unit. So in 2015, you got 10 more T hangar units and 1 additional bulk hangar unit. And then it hasn't been constructed yet, but now in the year we're in now, 2021, on the west side, we're proposing a 6 to 8 unit T hangar building, and the bids on that will open tomorrow. So we'll see how that comes in and take it from there as far as what we can construct. So that's the summary of since 2004, what hangars have been developed. And so in total, assuming that this project we're going to open bids on tomorrow goes forward, that would be 26 to 28 T hangar units since 2004, 2 bulk hangar units. And those were all funded by DOT at the 80 or 100% funding level. And then another note, just as far as the current hangar waiting list, as I understand it from John Ewell, is 110 people approximately. So next slide, please. So that's the, go, what's that?
It's like that at every airport in the southeast.
Yeah, right. That's the way I understand it. Okay, so this is related to what I just said, the previous slide. This is just an illustration of the same thing. So on the right side of the page there, on the east hangars, you got buildings E3, E4, and E7. That was the 2008-2015. And then on the west side, left side, top left of the page, 6 to 8 unit T hangar. That's the location we're looking to build the new hangar. Next slide, please. Okay, so the airport master plan. One quick note on when that was last updated, it was 2012. So we're approaching the time at which the master plan would typically be updated again, and it's scheduled in the JSUP 2024-25 for an update. And then I think the crux of the question from last month, what does the master plan and the associated ALP drawing currently show as it relates to hangar development? So overall on the airport layout plan, if you look at it, there are 29 either hangar units or areas for hangars that are identified to be built on the master plan. One note about T hangars, we do have, we built some T hangars like we just talked about since 2012. And we have one that we're hoping to build now. But beyond that, there's no additional T hangars identified on the ALP. However, some of those areas where we show box or bulk hangars, there could be a T hangar built there, just a clarification. But back to what's on the ALP now. So it's separated. If you go away from the overall plan, there's 3 separate areas identified: the North Terminal Area Plan, West Terminal Area Plan, and South Terminal Area Plan. And if you look at those separate sections, you've got 3 hangar areas shown in the north. In the west, there's 12 hangar executive unit hangars shown. And then in the south, 13 executive hangar units shown. And then also another near the industrial park, an area that could be used for aviation commercial development is how it's called out. But we've discussed, envisioned it as a spot for hangars. Next slide, please. So some illustrations related to what I just went through. So this is from the ALP, the North Terminal area. So the 1, 2, 3 labeled there, those are the 3 areas shown. The one on the number 1 would be just adjacent to the old terminal building and the entrance road. We've had some different concepts there about bulk hangars that could be constructed. Number 2 is the area that's been referred to at some points, at least, as the Jet Center, another commercial, hangar development area. And then number 3, at least the way it was drawn up back when this was created, is another area where hangars could be built. So that's what the north area shows for the current master plan. Go to the next slide, please. So this is now the west terminal area. So this is near the runway 9 end, and the highlighted box hangars or individual hangar units. You see there are 12 units shown. And then I just wanted to note that, you could take that farther to the west as well, to the left of where the highlighted area is, if it was so desired. Next slide. And then this is the south terminal area. So you've got the runway 35 in there and taxiway Charlie on the bottom. So on the right side of the page, 13 hangar units shown adjacent to Charlie and parallel to runway 927 there. And then on the west is that just kind of large parcel area, which is labeled as aviation commercial development area. We've gone through some different concepts of hangars that could go there, and that's another spot we envision hangars. Go on to the next slide. Okay, so this is not from the ALP. This is a sketch we recently put together that was requested related to the private hangar development. So basically, these were just locations that we thought would be good options. The city could present to a private hangar, or for any hangar, honestly, to be built. So number 1 there. So of these 4 that are shown here, the 2, 3, and 4 are exactly consistent with what we just looked at on the master plan. The number 1 is slightly different in that if you look at the master plan in that area, this is on the south side of taxiway Bravo. That's actually shown as an aircraft parking apron expansion. However, you could easily change that to have a hangar built there. That fits fine with airfield, offsets and all that kind of stuff. And also it's right adjacent to the existing east hangar. So there's no reason you couldn't go there. So that's number 1. Number 2 and 3 are in that south terminal area in that group of, I think it was 13 hangars that we looked at on the master plan. And then number 4 is also in that south terminal area in the next to the industrial park, and that larger parcel that's identified for aviation commercial use or hangars. Next slide, please. So this is a little sketch we just put together, and it's kind of just an update. So the sketch we were just looking at, the number 2, which is over there kind of near Moody Road. This is just a little, the same basic location, but this is an idea of how you could position a 60 by 60 hangar kind of with the easiest to get it access to the runway. So the notes I have on here, there's a section of taxiway there between the hangar unit and the runway 27 pavement end, where you would need to do some pavement rehab. That's the 365 by 35 foot wide taxiway rehab node. That is older pavement that was kind of in the same shape as 1230 before it was closed. And then the other notes on there, what's shown here is a 60 by 60 box hangar with a 60 by 60 hangar apron. And we kind of touched on this, and I'll talk about it a little bit more in a minute, but the lease area, lease boundary for a hangar would be bigger than the hangar itself. And that's, it could be something like what's shown here, which is approximately 16,000 square feet. Next slide, please. So moving on, private hangar feasibility. We've got a few slides that kind of have some different topics related to that. So addressing future interest, items that the city would need to consider. Like I was just talking about the lease area, that would need to be worked out by the city and the tenant. But in this reiteration of what I just said, the lease area would be greater than the hangar building, which was something we sort of talked about last month. Rule of thumb, I think Andrew had mentioned this before, you multiply the building area by 4, that'll give you kind of a rough idea of the overall lease area as it would typically be drawn up. The lease rate would be assigned by the city, agreed upon with the tenant, but as I understand it, was proposed as 31 cents per square foot per year. So if you use those area rules that I just talked about and multiply by 4, that would give you $4,500 annual. That's the ground lease revenue we're talking about there. And then just the last 2 notes, development responsibilities, maintenance responsibilities. Just pointing out that that's something that the city and the tenant developer would have to agree upon, any stipulations that need to go inside of that. So also related to private hangar feasibility, pros and cons for the city to consider. So what would be considered pros to the airport in the city? You would have additional based aircraft and aircraft activity. Whatever fuel sales would be associated with those aircraft would be a benefit. Increased business activity on the airport. All these things are direct revenue to the airport. This note about ad valorem tax, Andrew had pointed this out, and we weren't sure if that's a tax revenue to the city or not, but just wanted to throw that out there for the city to possibly verify. And then in the private hangar development, the city's not paying for construction of the hangar. The last note there. Cons to the airport in the city, potentially private use of public airport land. So you're giving, it's not your own building, someone else owns it now. Competition with city-owned hangars. Maintaining consistency with airport minimum operating standards, architectural standards. If you're not careful to make sure that what the tenant is building is what you want it to be, then there could be some issues related to that. And then the city doesn't collect rent revenue, you're only getting the ground lease. So those are some of the pros and cons that we identified for your consideration. Next slide, please. Okay, also feasibility, just something we wanted to bring up just before the meeting. Kind of had a question about what are the FAA grant assurances? Well, when an airport accepts grant funding federally from the FAA, there's a list of, I forget how many it is, but grant assurances is what they call them, where you accept that grant, you use their money to develop your airport, you're agreeing to these different terms. So so that kind of explains the applicability of it right there. But the 3 that were identified that we thought just wanted to bring to your attention for you to decide if it is of any concern as it relates to the subject today with private hangar development. Number 22 is titled Economic Non-Discrimination. And this is a quote from the beginning of that. We'll make the airport available. You're assuring that we will make the airport available as an airport for public use on reasonable terms and without unjust discrimination of all types, kinds, and classes of aeronautical activities. Number 23, exclusive rights is the title. It will permit no exclusive right for the use of the airport by any person providing or intending to provide aeronautical services to the public. If you go to the next slide, please, Sonny. And then the third one, we wanted to point out, number 24, fee and rental structure. It will maintain a fee and rental structure for the facilities and services at the airport, which will make the airport as self-sustaining as possible under the circumstances existing at the particular airport, taking into account such factors as the volume of traffic and economy of collection. So as I already said, these are just to decide if that has any concern with those 3 as it relates to whatever the recommendation for private hangar development may be. Next slide, please. So finally, what are the next proposed actions? In general, just one question that I at least would throw out there that should be answered is, in general, should private hangars be allowed? What would be the recommendation from the board on that? I don't know if there's any other general actions or questions to be answered as it relates to this. Number two, specifically to Mr. Valencourt, what response is needed? If you're going to respond, what is the recommendation to the City Commission? Number three, future response to similar requests. We specifically talked about this last month and kind of tied it into this subject. There's some possible interest off Moody Road also by Bass Pro Shops individual. And just the question, is there any action needed related to this? If so, who's leading that action? And that's it. And I'll leave you guys to discuss it.
Thank you, Matt. Very nice job and very detailed,
Okay.
like always.
Thank
Thank you.
We'll be
So-
here to help if you need.
Thank you. So Hugh, we'll start with you, maybe if it's okay, and we'll just go around the board this way.
Question for what is the usual, it seems to be the usual time limit on these land leases? What I've heard in the past, usually 25 years. Is that right? If that's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The second question in the same line is what other airports in this general southeast Georgia and northeast Florida area are allowing private rentals, and what seems to be their experience with this?
Good afternoon. My name is Brad Winty. I'm with Pass Row Associates. The first question in regard to the length of, I'm not speaking into it. The blue light is on. Can you hear me now? Okay. The typical lease term, you said 25 years. It's generally 20, 30-year lease with 2 10-year options. It's negotiated between the airport sponsor, in this case, the city, and the person that's correct. And the ownership of the building then reverts back to the city at that point. Okay, and then regard to other airports, we work for a number of other airports and all over east of the Mississippi. I think we've got 50+ airport clients, and it's fairly typical. This is a very typical to have a private developer come in and want to put up a corporate or bulk type hangar facility. Where it gets a little sticky, honestly, is if the private developer wants to put up T hangars and to compete directly with the city. So that's where we kind of judge caution. But if they're building the facility for their own private use, it's basically typically a no-brainer that the city is trying to bring in more aviation, more aircraft activity, fuel sales, et cetera, to bolster activity at the airport. So does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you. It's negotiable, John. It's whatever you need to do. It's whatever the city feels is right and just. It's generally a long-term lease, like 30, 40 years. Okay.
Mr. McLean? Yeah, you might as well stay up there. I got a couple of questions. Okay, I just got a series of questions. So I noticed that the hangars, you've got those. What about sundry buildings or complementary buildings to the hangars? Is that something you've seen at other airports? In other words, if I'm just using an example, if Valancourt wanted to build a storage facility beside their hangars, is that all part of this?
I think that we'd have to be very careful. No, the answer is no. We want the airport to be for airport use.
Right.
And we want to avoid the parking of like boats and campers and things like that.
That's where I was headed with
Okay.
this. So I made contact with Fort Lauderdale Executive Airport, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
I am.
And they, that was one of the big problems that they had when they first started doing leases to private individuals, is they had to qualify that. Mr. Chairman, that's something we need to be very careful of. Not to say anybody would, but it's something that they ran into. The other thing is, in your opinion of this, so we're municipally owned now. If the airport ever went to a private entity, how do you see the transfer of that happening with private on hangars? Based upon your experience.
Can you read?
Sure.
State the question. I'm not sure I
So
follow.
the city owns the airport now. If we gave the fixed base operation to a private entity, if a private entity began running the airport for us. Any issues that you've seen in the past with hangars being built by a private entity and then going over to being managed by a private entity?
Well, the contract, I mean, in this case, you know, the developer would still have the lease ground. So your new FBO or whomever would still just deal with those people. And then the contract is still with the city and it would revert after the life of the lease. So
Okay.
I don't envision any issues.
All right, and the last series of questions I've got have to do with 22, 23, and 24, the grant assurances. So in your experience, what you've seen with other airports that built private hangars, and then they went to get grants for other buildings through the FAA or whoever, have you seen any pitfalls in any of that with private hangars being built on there in terms of following the assurances as required by the FAA?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
No issues there.
Okay. Right. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have at this point in time.
Thank you, Wayne.
None at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ken.
Put your mic.
So has a question been answered whether or not the facility would be on the tax rolls after construction? Do we know that?
Mr. Mayor?
Historically, and this question came up earlier this morning in a different capacity, in a different meeting, but there are some allowances where when property is leased by a governmental agency, when that property is leased, there's an opportunity to recapture some property taxes based upon what the usage is. And I think it's just a matter of how you tailor that specific contract. And so I've got both counsel is on the call as well as Mr. Holmes, and so one of the things that we did historically with the golf course, for instance, is when we entered into the franchise agreements, it put us in a position where we didn't necessarily have to collect the taxes and the ad valorem taxes in the same way. But there are some rules that govern whether we can collect taxes or not based upon the leasing of the property. You want to add anything else, Counselor, or Mr. Holmes?
Brother Don, did you hear us?
I did, and I agree. I think that the general rule has been that if city-owned or government-owned property is used for income production, that the starting point is that it becomes taxable. But as the mayor indicated, it's possible to, I hate to use the word circumvent, but I guess that's calling it like it is, that provision by, as the mayor indicated, keeping it, franchising it, and handling it on that basis.
I
Thank
agree.
you.
Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button earlier. But I agree with Mr. Holmes and the mayor's assessment.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am, we can. Thank you.
So I guess, Ms. Miller, based on your experiences with the college and some of the things that you do, or you have a different understanding?
No, I'm just thinking that if it was added to the tax rolls, that could factor into, benefit to the
Additional
city.
benefits?
So, that was the basis for my question. My second question is, where does the 31 cents per square foot come from? How is that determined?
I'll just jump in. That value, I believe, is from Florida Department of Transportation economic study from airports. It's based on an average, and we'd have to, Matt, can you speak to that? Did you and Andrew?
I don't know. I thought what I was told is that was part of the proposal, but I'm not sure what that number. You know more than I do, it sounds like.
I think that number is derived from the Florida Department of Transportation. DOT does a lot of studies for various ground leases around the state of Florida, and I think that was part of their published. But we can track that down for you. Absolutely.
I think it's important to make sure that is, truly the market rate.
Right.
I agree with Mr. Valencourt. This is a price piece of property. And we want to make sure that it's adequate, make sure it's met market conditions.
We did do a market study a number of years ago, probably about 7 or 8 years ago, where an organization came out and compared us and produced, a report.
Yeah, I think that, anything more than, 3.5 minutes old is, pretty outdated.
8 years ago in St. Augustine would be another world.
Yeah.
I don't have.
Thank you, Melissa. Dana?
I think most of my questions have been answered, but I did have a question concerning one of the possible private hangar areas. The one that's identified as number 4. Is that outside of the gate of the airport?
I think that's over near the industrial park.
Right.
So as it stands right now, it is, but there was some work done on that parcel to clear it and get it ready to be developed should someone want to come in and build a hangar over there. So you'd have to rearrange the security fence line and build a little piece of taxiway also to get to the hangar location there as well.
I was just thinking it was possibly undesirable because it was not included in the fence, but you're saying it could be easily included instead of a,
Mhm.
okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
there's been concepts related to that in the past.
Thank you.
Sure.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Browning?
A couple of things. Can you hear me? Okay. One is I'm concerned about security. You're going to have a hangar sit way off somewhere. So we have talked about them coming in the gate by the fire station, depending on where it is. I think we need to look real close. The city is providing security for the airport at this time. When we go to put hangars all over the airport, it changes everything. You've got to figure that into a cost. Second thing is $375 a month. A lot of us, a lot of people have got hangars and they all are about $325 a month right now. And the size building that you're talking about, you can have put up pretty reasonably. And you can, for the size they are, you can actually sublease. You can actually make money, be a lot better off than you would be in our current hangars. So that if you're going to do this, it's got to be open to the public. If we're gonna do an area for hangars at $375 a month, I'm going to tell you, you're going to get a lot of takers. And so I think we've got to be careful that we don't do. Mr. Valancourt is a great guy and is doing a great job up there, and we want him on the airport. But let's face it, you can't just let one person. If we're going to do it, then we have to make sure we've got the right price and we allow it, and let's see whoever. I think if you put it up for bid, you're going to get a lot more. A study done 8 years ago, really? Our plan of the airport done 10 years ago. Our master plan that we're looking at is 10 years old, at least 10 years old. I think we should make sure we know the pricing. We don't know the pricing. I've seen absolutely nothing on any other airports. So mine is that I'd like to know the pricing by other airports. I'd like somebody to tell me the security. And I'd like to know why it's an advantage to the city to give a lease for the next 30 years for $375. If they are going to do that, I think they should consider giving a lease for the hangars they currently have. Now, it's just a business thing. Take a look at the footprint on the hangars we already have. And I believe there's people that would go into a long-term lease at some price to protect their thing there. So, I mean, I don't know how you reconcile $375 a month. I just don't see how you do it. Along with the security, there's got to be some more study. I want to see the figures of other airports. What are we going to do about security? And make it open to a number of people, not only Mr. Valancourt. We've mentioned another name. I think it's a good idea if we want to do it. But let's open them up. Let's find an area and put in a lot of hangars.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Can I make one
Please.
additional comment on that? I think John Browning's right on target. It's something the mayor said yesterday, not related to the airport, which he's keenly aware of now, is we got to make sure on city-owned properties that we're getting the bang for a buck when we're letting other people use it. So I think John Browning's comments are right on target.
Thank you. So is that something, Matt, that y'all can address and give us some market study on lease rates for the ground?
We can definitely check with some other airports to see what, their going rate is and report back to you.
Thank you. That would be very much appreciated. Is there any other things we want to leave Matt with, maybe that haven't been answered for next meeting?
Judd, could I speak for a second?
Yes, please.
Taking off on what John and Wayne has said, my comments from the last meeting are of record. I also am certainly not in any way, shape, or form negative towards Valancourt. I think if we want to encourage businesses and people like the owners and principals of that company to use Palatka and invest in Palatka and the airport and so forth. But we have tried to increasingly look at that phrase that is overused and underapplied called planning. And the idea of piecemealing a hangar here and there when someone requests it just seems to be inconsistent with that phrase and concept of planning at our airport. For instance, another cost that's not mentioned is that cost of the taxiway to access the hangar, and the next one and the one after that, and not only just putting that taxiway in, but then maintaining it. We all know what asphalt or what we're paying to pave, and that would be, I assume, a responsibility of the city. I assume that you'd have to factor that into your ground lease cost. You're talking about approximately 0.37 acres at 16,000 square feet, not counting. That would be the footprint that was laid out. So you're for 0.37 acres, as Mr. Browning indicated, you're talking about a relatively nominal amount, and we essentially lose it for 40 years. I don't know what it'll be worth after 40 years, but it's essentially, a fixed payment for 40 years, which has quite a deal when you compare to what we're charging for our T hangars. You figure the cost of a 60 by 60. I understand they got to put a building up, but it appears to me, number one, if you're going to factor in the advantages that were cited by Passero, you also have to ask what's going to be put in the hangar, because a single engine private plane doesn't generate a bunch of fuel sales, especially not a small one. It generates some activity depending upon how it's being flown, but there's apples and oranges compared to, for instance, if it's a business jet or a business twin or something like that. So it's a matter of degree, I guess, but it is a matter of degree. And then finally, from my perspective, if you're going to say that, if the city is going to ultimately say that we're going to allow private hangar construction rather than a piecemeal on a one-by-one basis, I would rather see the city, the Airport Advisory Commission, et cetera, designate an area and say, okay, look, we're going to allow 10 hangars here, 4 hangars here, 6 hangars here, whatever, and just dedicate this area to privately constructed hangars for this amount and with these terms as far as grounds maintenance, et cetera. And then, as someone indicated, then open it up. Here's 6 spots, 8 spots. Here we go. Rather than considering this on a request by request basis. So, do you understand my points?
Yep. Thank you very much, Mr. Holmes. Anybody else have a comment? Well, I think we made a lot of progress on this topic, and we'll put this on the agenda again for next meeting to hopefully finalize. And maybe we can all think about all the comments that were made and have a conclusion. Again, thank you, Mr. Valencourt, for coming.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
real quick, and I'm asking the question, I don't know the answer to this question. So at this point in time, would this be a topic that we would want the city commission to weigh in on, or do we want them to wait until we make a recommendation to them? It's a question. I don't know what the answer is to that. Because, well, let me ask that. The reason why I'm saying that is, what is their mindset about where the airport's headed and that type of thing? And we don't want to go down a path that they're not going down in the same mindset with this, but maybe it's too soon to ask them that. I don't know the answer.
So, Mr. Mayor, would you like maybe me to come and present this to the commission?
I mean, I'm just one of 5 votes. Typically the weakest of the 5 some days. But I do think that with the conversations that we've recently had in the last meeting, it makes more sense to me to actually have a workshop where we talk about the direction that we want to see the airport go in, where the commission's included in with the board. I think that conversation, there's been some conversation of whether the airport is at a point where it needs to be privatized. There's some conversation as to what do we do from a planning standpoint to maximize profits, or what direction we're going. And so one of the things we've been talking about overall is how do we determine what we want our identities to be in various capacities and creating strategic plans for that. Don, this goes right along with the breakout groups. We're talking about stakeholder groups and things of that nature. And so my suggestion would be to actually have a workshop where everybody's involved, where we bring in Passero as well as anyone else that we want to talk about what growing trends are airport wise and what opportunities exist.
Okay. And would you maybe give us a proposed date when you can of what you think that would look like, so that
We
maybe
can-
John can run it by all of us?
We
John,
can
you-
send it out and tie it into what we're doing strategic plan facilitation wise as well.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a good idea. Okay, unfortunately, we have really ate up our hour, and we have 15 minutes left. And that's not really fair for 4B, because that's quite a big topic. And Mr. Yule, I don't know, we might have to leave you off today, but we all have read your report. So can we maybe jump to 4B real fast? I see a handsome boss man there in the middle that, well, I was talking about the middle. And then we got a couple of guys like me. And, but if y'all want to come up and speak to us, that'd be very nice.
Little background on this, here, Aviation on the beach.
We can't hear John.
A number of months ago, Charlie Douglas and Mr. Tomlinson here came to me and with a proposal of taking over the fly-in. They really enjoyed it, and I asked them to put something together for presentation to the board. So without further ado, this is Mr. Tomlinson from Tomlinson Aviation, and Charlie Douglas is zoomed in here.
Welcome, sir, and thank you for taking time to come see us.
I'll make this pretty quick, since I know we're time limited. I'm Neil Tomlinson, Tomlinson Aviation out of Ormond Beach. I'm with Joe Horton. He's the Director of Maintenance, Vice President. And Gary Marshhauser, he's retired Air Traffic Control. I'll give you a quick bio on myself. Graduated Appalachian State University, did another undergraduate at Embry-Riddle, did my master's at Riddle and a doctoral candidate at UCF. I worked for Sikorsky Helicopter. I worked for SAS, Scandinavian Airlines System. Actually taught in the Air Science Department in Embry-Riddle. I've had my own company for 30 years. I've been working for Florida Power and Light for about 20 years now. I'm the guy that turns your power on after a hurricane. And that's how I kind of got to knowing John. Anyway, the fly-in, it's a great community asset that you have. It truly is. And we are here to volunteer to help you get it done. Years ago, about 20 years ago, I had some representatives of the Children's Home Society they came to me and go, Mr. Tomlinson, would you volunteer a helicopter to do a golf ball drop at our, they were having a golf tournament. And I said, sure. So they went out in the community and they sold for $1, you get a number. I don't know if y'all are familiar with golf ball drops. But at the end of their tournament, we came over with the helicopter. We dropped, they had a hole that they made in the fairway, and it was the closest to the hole won $1,000. Guess what? They raised $30,000 off just that event. Next year they came to me, and the guy goes, Neil, I want you to see what the first prize is. They drove up a brand new $35,000 BMW. They raised big money. So over the years, Tomlinson, we've helped with eye care. Let's see, Children's Home Society, eye care, and other things. And the Civil Air Patrol helped them. And I have already contacted the regional director of the Civil Air Patrol, and they are interested in helping. What I look at this is it's a great way that you have to raise money for your local things like the Police Explorers, your Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Habitat for Humanity. There's lots of different ways. I mean, you have it here. You're blessed for the flying. Second thing is, it's the first time maybe a young man or a girl can go and see an aircraft. And anyway, I think you're sitting real pretty with this. And I'm here to volunteer expertise and whatever I can do to help you and to help support John.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. You can stay right there. And Mr. Douglas, it's nice to have you with us. How are you participating?
Hello, Chairman Neufeld. This is Charlie Douglas. Thank you all for allowing me to come in remote. I had a previously scheduled travel with family out of state. So otherwise I would be with you in person. But the way this came about was maybe a year ago, there was some discussion whether the airport fly-in would occur for February of 2022, which is coming up in about 6 months. And there was some uncertainty there whether that would happen. And so I know what aviation has meant to me in my life, and how I was first introduced to aviation was at a fly-in at Eagle's Nest. Many of you remember Colonel Sauls, who had Thunderbird Air Park. He was down at the fly-in at Eagle's Nest and took me, then an 8-year-old boy, flying for the first time. And I was bit by the aviation bug and have been flying ever since, really. I started my formal training with Mr. Hudson. Do y'all remember him? And actually, it was in Brother Johnson's Cessna 150. I had my first couple of lessons in that airplane at 28 Juliet. And as the years progressed, I finally finished my private pilot's license and my instrument rating. And now, about 8 months ago, started a rotorcraft add-on. And that's how I first met Neil Tomlinson. But Neil will not brag on himself, but he is a legend in the aviation community and is a big supporter of the community. He is one of the main reasons why we have electricity after storms, because of the reconnaissance they do on these big transmission lines. He is well known in the law enforcement community. He has sold many helicopters to different law enforcement agencies throughout the southeastern United States. And I can remember when Sheriff Jeff Hardy was in office, I believe he even took lessons from Neil's group and had some time at a Jet Ranger. And also Neil has a helicopter school in Ormond Beach at his hangar there, and has taught thousands of people how to fly. And Lord willing, in about 3 weeks, hopefully I will pass my check ride on the rotorcraft add-on. But in talking with Neil about the flying in Palatka, I was sad to hear that maybe the flying would not happen. And he said, based on what we've done and the contacts and the network that Neil has, that he'd be able to organize and help produce a flying like that. And so we started working on a special events permit, but we didn't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. We want to be very deferential to John, to the Airport Advisory Board, who have very successfully handled these fly-ins in the past. And there are big shoes to fill of John's. And so many others there on the Airport Advisory Board who have worked countless hours, day and night, organizing these fly-ins through the years. And it would be a big task to take on, but we want to do that if it means that if the Airport Advisory Board decided not to do a fly-in, we would hate to see that event not happen because of just like Neil said, the community. How many other boys and girls come to the fly-in and they are able to see up close and personal and touch an airplane and maybe take a ride in a helicopter or a fixed wing. And so that's really what we want to do. We just want to help spread the word about aviation and the love of flying. And so I guess our ask today is, would you bless us to help with the fly-in and organize that if the Airport Advisory Board is not going to do it in February, and really just with the goal of sparking the wonder of aviation in kids and families throughout Putnam County.
Thank you, Charlie. That's a very nice presentation, and I'm sorry we didn't have more time. But in the remaining few minutes, I don't want to speak for everybody, but we voted not to participate again in the fly-in. We did 10 years, and I guess the word old isn't supposed to be used, but we're feeling a little bit like we're not quite young enough to take that challenge for the 11th year. So I'm sure we would like to hear more. We can put you first on the agenda next meeting rather than last, and hear some more details about who's going to do what and how it's going to happen. But maybe we can just go around the room in real fast. Wayne? Oh, I left out Hugh. Hugh? No questions.
I definitely echo your agreements there with letting us get them. And again, I'm going to go back, the city's got to play a big part in this too. So very much. And Mr. Douglas, so glad that you're becoming a roto head. Thank you so much for that instead of a fixed wing guy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want you to know that I appreciate the sentiments that Charlie reflected, because, we have lost members of the advisory board here for the simple reason, that they got the idea that we had stopped as a unit, stopped promoting the concept of general aviation that gets young people and families excited about our military as well as general aviation, and the fly-in is a great tool for that. Which made a huge difference in my life at the 75th anniversary of naval aviation there in Pensacola, is where I got the bug. And so I appreciate the vision. I appreciate the passion that also our speaker at the podium, also Neil, I appreciate that. And who knows, maybe something can come about this, because I believe it's certainly something that God blessed, for 10 years. And you're not going to stop blessing now, but I do think that there needs to be some young participants.
I'd love to see it continue. I appreciate you expressing interest in Charlie.
One more time. There you go.
Yeah, I appreciate you expressing the interest. I'm totally supportive of your efforts. I certainly hope that you're continuing conversations with city staff and going through the questions that they have. My only concern right now is, postponing it a month. If you're seeking the same time frame, is that going to put you behind in your planning efforts? So that would be my concern, but I certainly support your efforts.
Thank you.
I would just echo that sentiment. I'm thrilled that someone is willing to step up and do the event. It's wonderful for all the reasons you've heard. And I can remember back to one of the first couple of years, I was shocked at how many adult residents were unaware of the airport and what an asset we had in this community. They were coming in the gate saying, oh my, how did we not know this was here? So it's such a great tool, and I hated for it to go away, but as we've commented on the reasons, it is a lot of work that we just couldn't do the heavy lifting for. So I appreciate y'all's willingness to come forward and look forward to a partnership in the future.
Mr. Browning?
Yes, and Charlie, as always, you do a good job with everything you do. I would say that we've done it 10 years, and people have come to expect at least what we had done. And I think that we should work with Charlie and maybe and Neil, give some of the ideas on some of the experience that we've had, the mistakes, the good, the bad, the things, and work, maybe dovetail in helping them. Surely this is what we've been looking for, but I think we have some things to offer that we have done that maybe can help you, and be glad to talk to you and see if there are any of that. We just couldn't do it. And this is what we've really been looking for, somebody to take it over. I know that all of us are willing to help. We just couldn't do it all like you are. And I, for one, would suggest that we move this forward to the city commission with a positive on ours, and that we will assist, if it's okay with them, in some of the planning. We go ahead and move it. If the city agrees, then we can work out any issues that may be. Rather than wait a month, we'll be right back where we are now. So I'd like to move that this organization take over the fly-in with advice and counsel from the advisory board.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carried. Any negatives? Okay, motion carried. Well, thank you very much, John. Thank you, everybody. Thank you all for being here today. We appreciate it. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
All right, we have a second. All right, all in favor, say aye. We're adjourned.